Hey everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on Leader as Coach, the most understood role in leadership. My name is Brian Gottmers. I'm a technical producer and host. I am the production director from Bluepoint Leadership Development, and I'm happy to have all of you here today with us. Couple housekeeping items. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the recording tomorrow. As well, today's slides are available in the resource widget. As well, we will be using the chat pod throughout the event and would love to kick off things where, we're using the chat in the event and would just love to kick off things. If you want to pop in there and just say hello, put in where you're calling in from, and I can put in where I'm calling in from if my accent doesn't give it away already. I'm calling from North Vancouver, BC, Canada, so I'm just on the West Coast. And I would like to introduce my fearless leader and a good friend of mine, Joan Peterson, who I've had the privilege of working with, I think, over 12 years now. So we're excited to have Joan, and we're ready for you, Joan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'd love, as Brian said, for you to be working that chat pod and for saying hello and where you're from so that you can connect with each other. As Brian said, my name's Joan Peterson. I work, as Brian does as well, with an organization called Bluepoint Leadership Development. For those of you who don't know us, we work with leaders all over the world, and we help build leadership skills in topics like coaching, communication, emotional intelligence, leading change, etc. Super excited to talk about this idea of the role of coach that leaders play and how, gosh, we've been doing this work for a lot of years, for decades, and how we've come to realize that it's a really misunderstood role inside organizations. And I'd like to start really by sharing this thought, these questions. And I'm going to ask you to think about your own organization. If I were to poll senior leadership, if I were to poll your leaders, if I were to poll individual contributors inside your organization, how would they respond to these questions? What if I were to ask them, what does great coaching look like? What would they say? And would you get the same response from those different constituent groups? What about, who should leaders coach? Would there be agreement on who leaders should spend their time coaching? Or when is it most appropriate for leaders to coach? Would there be agreement again for that question as well? We've gotten to see inside organizations, and we've worked with organizations for the past few decades. And what we found is that it's not easy to get alignment on these three questions, which is really why it's such a misunderstood role that leaders play. My hope is we'll use our time today to explore those three questions, to give you some tools, some things to think about, some best practices. My hope is, again, you'll engage with each other in the chat pod, sharing some of your thoughts on those three questions. And regardless of where you sit inside the organization, whether you're a leadership development professional, whether you're a leader here for yourself, whether you're a senior executive, whether you coach for a living, my hope is that you can add your perspective again into the chat pod and that you can really think about moving the needle. How do I move the needle toward alignment around, well, what is this role of coaching that leaders play? And how do I make sure that we're all marching in the same direction? So that's really our game plan for today. Really what we'll look at, and we will look at it through the lens of equipping leaders. We'll look at first the skills piece. That's what does great coaching look like? Then we'll look at the mindset piece. That's around, well, who should leaders be coaching? And then we'll look at the judgment piece. And that is, well, when do I coach? And when do I do other things that I need to do as a leader? So we'll start first with the skills piece, that what piece. And I think most individuals, those in the leadership development space, those who coach for a living, recognize some of the skills associated with coaching. But I do think there's some myths around that first question around, well, what does great coaching look like? And I'll share what some of the things I think I hear inside organizations. And leaders don't tell me this exactly, but really when we start to dig into coaching, what I hear from them later is, oh, I didn't realize that coaching wasn't giving feedback. I didn't realize that coaching wasn't about me giving advice. I didn't realize that coaching wasn't about managing performance. I thought that if I coached, I was being a cheerleader. So how do we create a common language around coaching so that people recognize that it really isn't that? And I also think that Hollywood has led us astray. One of the things that I oftentimes ask in the workshop that we lead on coaching is, okay, if you went to the movies or to the TV, who would you say is a great example of a coach? And I hear lots of examples, some good examples of what great coaching looks like, and some not so good examples. I think sometimes we assume what great coaching looks like are sports coaches. So I'm going to share a few slides from television and movies. Now, even if you don't know the movie, it's fine. We're going to move through these pretty quickly. But I'm going to ask you to put in the chat pod, do you think this person is a good representation of what great coaching looks like or not? And if you do think it is, again, using the chat pod, what is it about this person that you think is great coaching? So the first, and I hear this a lot in my workshops, okay, can you tell me what great coaching looks like? Ted Lasso, for those of you who don't know the television show Ted Lasso, soccer coach. So I'm going to ask you to put in the chat pod, good example of coaching or not so good example? And if yes, what is it about Ted Lasso that makes him come up so frequently inside the workshops that I lead? I have to say he's probably one of the ones that comes up most frequently. And I'll wait for, yeah, amazing coach. Gerald, I think you're right. I think a really good coach. I think he does a wonderful job of balancing support and balancing challenge. I think he is, Christine, he's encouraging, he's kind, he's motivating. So that comes up quite frequently. So we start to think about, okay, what does great coaching look like? Some of the other ones, this one has never come up. So this is not, but I think I'm going to go to this one first. A really good example of what coaching is not. I don't know if anyone has ever seen The Devil Wears Prada. Miranda Priestley tends to be seen as, I don't think we even need to put in the chat, but not a good coach, really successful at what she does. And I shared this as sort of the antithesis of Ted Lasso. I do think there are more nuanced coaches that Hollywood shows as great coaching. And this is one of the ones that I think, and I don't know if anyone has seen Remember the Titans. This does come up in some of the workshops I lead. Oh, let me talk about Coach Boone. Great coach. And I think not, like if I'm looking at coaching and coaching skills, probably not the best example. I think what he was really good at was challenging, wasn't as good at the nurturing part of coaching. And he was really good at having tough conversations. So again, I think if we just think Hollywood, sometimes we don't get a really good example of what great coaching looks like. Here's one of the examples that we use in our workshop of great coaching. And I'd love for you to use the chat pod here. What is it about Yoda that makes Yoda one of the best coaches out there in terms of when you look in the movies? My guess is there's some Star Wars fans in the room. Like, what is it about this guy that makes him a great coach? Again, looking forward to you sharing some of the thoughts there. One of the individuals in a workshop I was with when I pulled up the Yoda slide said, I've never seen any of the Star Wars movies, but I just look at the picture and what I see is big ears, must be a good listener. And I'm like, yes. And all the things you're putting in the chat pod makes you think, believes in you more than you believe in yourself. The reflective questioning, cool, calm, collected. Yes, that's what makes him a great coach. Really good example. Now I'm going to sort of age and date myself here. I think if we go into the movies and talk about great coaching and we don't talk about Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, like I have led us astray, like a wonderful example of great coaching. Again, learning by doing, the coaching the whole person, the support and the challenge. So if we go to the movies, let's go to the right movies to look at what great coaching looks like. But let's also bring it back to reality. And one of the things that we ask our leaders in our workshops to think about is thinking back on your life, who has been your best coach? And I'm going to ask you to think about this for yourself. if I were to ask you, who was the person who made the difference for you? Maybe they're responsible for you being in the role you're in now. Who is the person that has shown up for you and helped you be your best? And why did you choose them? What were the traits and characteristics that caused you to choose them? So I'm going to ask you not just to think about who that person is, but what was it about them? And I'll ask you to put those in the chat pod. And I found in the leaders that I've spoken with, everybody has someone that they can talk about, whether it's a family member or a first boss or a sports coach or a teacher. We've all had people who have made a difference for us. And when we invite them to talk about this, the people whom they've chosen, and to start to come up with a list of traits and characteristics of why did you choose that person and who are they and how did they show up? What's quite interesting is when you look at all the things that they talk about, it's the things that you're putting in the chat pod, that encouragement and that support, the motivating and the challenge, the being able to share themselves, being approachable. Yeah, committed to my development. Oh my gosh, I love that. Asks great questions. My husband, how incredible, right? To have someone living with me that is able to be that person for me. So think about what happens in these workshops when we ask people to talk about their personal best coach. Oh my gosh, my mom, I'm getting like, oh, love that. When we start to talk about what is it and why we chose these people, we start to generate flip charts of lists of what great coaching looks like. The energy goes way up. And what we find is that the lists all look the same. When we really ask people to think about what does this look like for you, here's what we see. We see what you've put in the chat pods. We see this person encouraged me. They took a chance on me. They challenged me. They cared about me. They saw something in me I didn't see in myself. They did both the challenging and the support. So again, what's quite interesting, we deliver this workshop. We work with leaders all over the world. And the flip charts all look the same. They look like this. And I think what's surprising to leaders is what's not on the list. What's not on the list is they told me what to do. They gave me great advice. My guess is whomever you put in the chat pod, whether it's your mom or your grandmom or a first boss or a teacher, at times they gave you advice and at times they told you what to do. But what shows up on the list are these characteristics. So can we help the leaders inside our organization? Can we help executives inside our organization recognize that this is what great coaching looks like? It's not the other. It's not giving advice. It's not directing. I need to do that as a leader, but it's not coaching. And so I think for me to be able to sort of dispel the myth around great coaching is I tell you what to do. Great coaching is I fix you. Great coaching is I'm going to coach you up on this means you're doing something wrong. I need to start with this is what great coaching looks like. And I need to equip you with skills. So I think it's important to start with mindset in terms of what does it look like? And I need to give you skill set. And we can give skill sets in lots of different ways. Lots of the organizations we work with, they either use our coaching flow, some use the GROW coaching flow. We need to help leaders recognize how to have the conversation. For ours, it's around discovery. I need to explore. I need to learn. I need to help the person I'm coaching learn. I need to help them create possibilities. I need to help them create opportunities. And then I end with commitments. So that's part of it. I think we need to help leaders recognize what it looks like, give them some skills. I know some of you talked about they ask great questions. I think it's helpful if we give leaders a set of questions, like what's a coach-like question? What does it mean to ask a big question? We've provided you with ours. It's 60 big coaching questions. It's in the resource widget. Again, it makes it easier for folks to coach when they have tools that they can use. So I know what it looks like. Now I have tools to use when I'm coaching. So again, you're free to look through that. You're free to pass that along. I also think that it's not just about helping the leaders learn the theory and giving them the skills. Coaching's hard, especially when I first start to coach and I recognize that it's not giving advice. So I need to start to do it in a way that it becomes second nature for me. So part of our role inside organizations, for those of you who are in leadership development roles, is to help people find opportunities to practice. And role plays, if most workshops will say, how many of you like role plays? And people run screaming from the room. Like, most people don't like role plays. So I'm like, let's not do them. Let's actually have people coach on real life stuff. Let me be myself. Let me practice coaching skills with you on a real life challenge that you're having. And one of the things we ask when we are delivering a coaching workshop is, during this coaching exercise, you are not, as the coach, allowed to give one piece of advice. You're going to tap into some other tool, whether it's paraphrasing, whether it's asking big questions, rather than fixing the problem for them. And what's interesting is, in the debrief, what you hear the coaches say, is those who are coaches during the exercise, is, I didn't realize how hard it was. I didn't realize how frequently I jumped right to, let me solve the problem for you. So it's critical that we give leaders an opportunity to practice in a real environment where they don't have to pretend to be someone and coach somebody who's pretending to be someone else. I also think, do we give people opportunities to coach after we've equipped them with skills? So yes, and we are equipping them with skills, let them practice in a workshop type setting. But following that, do we give them something to do after? And here's just, and I'll go through this quickly, here are just some options. So there's application coaching or trios. This is a group of people, self-directed, who work together around applying some of what they've learned. Coaching assignments, following a workshop, do I formally or informally make it part of the workshop that people are coaching, whether they coach each other or they coach someone else, or they make it part of some of their one-on-ones. I'll dive into coaching circles in just a bit, because we found that to be really, really effective. And then AI coaching is another way that individuals can start to put some of those skills into practice, either using AI as a partner in terms of my own development, or using an AI coach as a way to see what some of the great coaching questions could be. I do want to really drill down on coaching circles. For those of you who aren't familiar with coaching circles, really it's getting small groups of participants from a workshop, or individuals who you want to build their coaching skills together, and could be in person. Typically we do this online in a Zoom format or Teams format, and it gives them an opportunity to coach each other. So here's how it typically looks. I'll share with you a simple agenda. There's a sort of a welcome, set up some psychological safety. Say there's 6 to 10 of us on the call. We would talk about what we're working on, successes and challenges, learning opportunities, applying some of the coaching skills. And then someone would step up and be the person who will be coached with a real life challenge. And then one person would coach them for a few minutes. And then another person would coach that same person on the same challenge, sort of tag team coaching, until everyone has coached that individual. And then each person would receive feedback on their coaching. Here's what's wonderful about this. We're all learning together. We're working on a real life challenge, and we're getting feedback on our coaching. When we coach inside organizations, we never get feedback. So this is a really nice opportunity for there to be an environment that's safe, that I can practice coaching, that I can receive coaching, and that I can get feedback on my coaching. Now, we found these to be very effective. And one of the things we'd like to invite you to is, every so often we do some complimentary coaching circles for 2 reasons. One is so that the participants can be a part of a community who's looking to build their coaching skills or bring coaching skills back into the organization. The other reason is for you to kind of put on, can I bring this back into my organization? So I'll wear 2 hats during the coaching circle. I'll facilitate the coaching circle, as well as say, okay, if you bring this back, here's what you would do now. So we'd like to invite you to participate in one of the 2 that we have coming up. Of course, it's complimentary, and the intention is to pass it forward, to try and start to build more of coach-like environment inside organizations, and to equip some of the folks who join our webinars with things they can bring back into their organization. There's some instructions on how to RSVP. We do try and keep the groups fairly small, so there is a bit of there's a bit of a size challenge here. So my colleagues will get back to you, and kind of let us know as soon as possible if you want to attend and if you have a date preference, and we'll make sure we get you into that. I'd like to make a shift from that skills to the mindset. And the mindset is around the who. This is, well, who should I coach? And again, I think there's some myths around the who should I coach. Here's what I sometimes hear, like, okay, leaders should only coach poor performers, or leaders should coach everyone all the time because I just came out of a coaching workshop, or leaders should only coach their direct reports, or, leaders should only coach when they have time. And again, I think they're all myths. I believe that leaders need to be open to coaching up, down, and across the organization. Leaders need to think about their role as coaching, not just for when I have time, not just for my direct reports. I don't just coach down inside the organization. And one of the things that we talk about, and I'll ask you to be thinking about this as well, we ask individuals in our workshops to think about this question. You have limited time and energy. In whom should you invest that time and energy? Your A players, or your top performers, or your B players, your poorer performers? And I don't think there's a right answer to this. The reason why we ask it is so that leaders start to think about, well, where am I spending my time? And I think it's interesting to hear different perspectives. Well, I coach my top performers or my A players because of this, or I coach my poorer performers or my B players because of this, or I coach both, and here's why. I think it's really interesting to hear those perspectives. The reason why we ask this question isn't as simple as that. The reason why we ask this question is when you start to think about where you spend your time, you start to put people into buckets, right? Like A players and B players. And here's what we know. We know that people know in which list they sit. They know if we consider them an A player or a B player. And they respond accordingly. When I think about it, if I were to say everyone in this call is on somebody's A list, how do we respond? We typically respond by being engaged, by being motivated, by being confident, by stepping out of our comfort zone. And if I were to say, okay, all of you sit on someone's B list, how might we respond? Quite often our energy takes a bit of a dip. Sometimes our trust isn't as high. Sometimes we get defensive. So this idea of coaching perspective becomes incredibly important for leaders to recognize that they make a difference. Simpler way of saying it is this. It's this idea that sometimes I hear this and with some of the leaders I work with, well, I'm open to coaching everyone, whether you're a high performer or a low performer. I just don't coach the uncoachable. And maybe some of you are thinking that as well. Like, I'm open to coaching everyone that wants coaching. But there are people, Joan, who are uncoachable, and I'm not going to coach them. And I'll challenge that thought. Like, I believe most people want to do a good job inside organizations. I think most people want to be at their best. I wonder if somebody's showing up as uncoachable, do they just not want coaching from us? And I'll challenge all of you, if there's someone on your team, if there's someone you work with that you're like, uncoachable, shine the light on you just for a moment. Is there something you're doing that's causing them not to want coaching from you? And I think when we challenge leaders with who should you be coaching, we need to challenge them with this. It's, what is it that you're doing that's earning you the right to coach others? Are you treating people as if they were what they ought to be so that you can help them become what they're capable of being? Are you earning the right to coach? I'm going to bring back our friends from the movies, and I'm going to ask you at the same time, what is it, to use the chat pod here? What do you think leaders need to do to earn the right to coach others? Another way of looking at this is, what is it that people need to do in order for you maybe to want coaching from them? So what earns us the right to coach others? Again, I'll invite you to share your thoughts in the chat pod. And a good way to look at this might be kind of looking at the differences between Ted Lasso and Miranda Priestley, from Ted Lasso and The Devil Wears Prada. Like, what did he do that earned him the right to coach? And what did she do that didn't earn her the right to coach? Again, I'd love your thoughts here. Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. Active listener, earned my trust, approachable. I think all those, like if I want coaching from someone, like I want to trust them. I want them to listen to me. I want them to be approachable. What else? What are some of the things that earn us the right to coach others? And then I think if you have people on your uncoachable list, it starts to, we need to start thinking about, okay, what am I doing that's not showing genuine care, that, you know, doesn't show a level of respect? I think that's so important. Like, do I treat them with dignity and respect, and then build on that? And then if you look at the two of these individuals, I mean, they couldn't be any more different. Ted Lasso did the thing. He built trust. A lot of the things that you talked about, he inspired through belief and purpose. Like, he coached the whole person, not just the player. He was curious. He empowered others to own things themselves. I, again, love all the things that you're putting in the chat pod here. What's interesting, I think, when you look at the two, Ted Lasso, and I'm going to drill down on one particular characteristic, they both did, like, he lives his values. Miranda Priestley, her values shifted based on kind of what she was looking to get out of the outcome. And I'd like to ask you all to kind of pause and think about this idea of values and coaching. I wonder if, my guess is many of you have thought about, what are your values? What's most important to you? And I'd like to ask you to just to pause for a moment and think about this idea of values. What is it that earns us the right to coach around our values? Are we showing up with consistency? And I'm going to ask you to think about what your values are. And I've put some on the screen here. And again, my guess is many of you have done work around your own values, like how this is a way for me to show up consistently. What are your values? I wonder, and then I'm going to ask you to put them in the chat pod. If you had to choose 5 from this list, what would you choose? What do you stand for? What are the things that are most important to you? And do you show up like that every day? That consistency earns us the right to coach. So I'm just going to pause. Ask you to look at that list. I'm going to invite you to put into the chat pod, which of these most important to you at this point in time in your life? Which do you most value? I don't think we do this enough. I don't think we come back to this idea of values. So what is it for you? Like, if I were to put mine in the chat pod, and again, I'll invite you to do the same, I would probably put curiosity. I would put autonomy. And I would put community, which seem like they're mutually exclusive. Achievement is important to me. And again, just to name a few. Thanks, Janet, for starting us off. I love for groups to put in kind of the chat pod, here's what's most important to me. And I'm so grateful that you're putting those in. And honor each other by looking at, and I recognize many of you from different organizations, we're all different. I wonder, do we recognize that? And I could have, you know, however many people are on this call, if you all put your 5 values into the chat pod, the likelihood is that there wouldn't be any 2 that were the same. Nathan, I love that. Always be kind. I wonder, do we show up like that every day? Earns us the right to coach. I think what else earns us the right to coach is when we honor people for their values, when we know that others are different than we are, that they're motivated by different things than we are. And I think that we explore values as part of coaching because it does help us to appreciate the diversity around us. It creates a more inclusive environment. Helps us recognize our own biases. Like, am I treating people differently because they have different values than I do? Helps us develop a language. It helps us show up as consistent. And when I'm coaching others, it's important for me that I know that I coach towards sustained change. Like, I'm not going to change unless I can connect it with something that's important to me. Again, I think extremely important for us to recognize what our values are and recognizing the values of others. It helps, again, to earn us the right to coach. I'd like to make a bit of a shift to the last piece. And this last piece around equipping leaders to coach, we've talked about what does great coaching look like? Who do I coach? And have I earned the right to coach? And the last piece is around when do I coach? And again, I think there's some myths around this as well. When I ask leaders, when do I coach? Here's some of the responses. So I coach when there's a problem. I coach when I have time. All right, Joan, so I'm going to leave here and I'm going to coach in my one-on-ones. All right, I'm going to coach when things slow down. I'm going to coach when somebody asks me for coaching. And I think we do leaders a disservice if we don't spend time looking at, well, when is it appropriate for me to coach? And as leaders, as a leader, I have many different responsibilities. I have a responsibility to direct. I have a responsibility to advise. I have a responsibility to teach, to mentor, and to coach. And I do think we need to equip leaders with recognizing when do I do which. And if you look at this continuum here, it kind of shows when I direct, I own the agenda as the leader. So I direct when there's only one right answer. I direct when I set expectations. I direct when somebody doesn't know the first step forward. I direct in an emergency. I direct safety, non-negotiables. When I advise, I give part of the agenda away. So I share my expertise, but the person I'm coaching, the talent, actually needs to follow through on it. I think this is really misunderstood. When I ask leaders, when's the most appropriate time to give advice, the number one answer is, I give advice when somebody asks for it. Well, sometimes I think people ask for advice and they're equipped. We should be coaching them to come up with their own answers. So helping leaders get comfortable with, I give advice when the person is equipped. I give advice when the person's not equipped. I coach when the person is equipped so they can come up with their own responses. They can develop them. That's where the impact takes place. The impact takes place when people can solve problems for themselves. But unless as a leader, I recognize that I still have a responsibility to direct, advise, teach, and mentor, and I have a responsibility to coach. I think how else we can equip ourselves and leaders to coach when appropriate is recognizing that I think most leaders recognize this, that I have a responsibility to formally coach my one-on-ones, my team. I think this is the piece we miss. We miss the opportunity to coach in the moment. That is, I see someone and I use that moment to support or challenge them, or both. It could be someone on my team. It could be a peer. It could be a manager. It could be a direct report. And I look for opportunities to be coach-like so that I can start to build a universal coach-like approach. I think part of how we equip leaders as well is to help them think about, well, in what situations do I coach? Like, well, what if I'm invited to coach? How do I start the conversation? Well, what if, how do I extend an offer to coach? Or how do I shift the conversation? And that's the one I'd like to dig into here. I think for many leaders, they come into the workshops with us and they think that I'm going to coach someone as I'm going to give them feedback, or I'm going to coach someone, they're struggling and I'm going to manage their performance. And I do think that feedback and performance management is a part of my role as leader. It's not coaching. So there are some times where I need to share feedback. It's more directive if we look at the coaching impact model, and then shift the conversation to a coach-like conversation, which could sound something like this. I offer feedback, whether I use SBI or situation behavior impact or another model, and then shift to a coach-like conversation. So I've shared my perspective. I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Let's explore how you might look to develop that moving forward. So it's more of they own what they're going to do about it instead of me being directive the whole time. So I think, again, we need to equip leaders differently than we do currently around, what does coaching look like? Who do I coach? And how do I coach? So I know we started at the top of the hour with this question, what does great coaching look like if I were to pull people inside the organization? Who should leaders coach? When is it most appropriate for leaders to coach? And my question for you is what will you do differently when you go back? How will you equip yourself? Or how will you equip the leaders around you to respond with some consistency around what does great coaching look like? Are we helping leaders, executives, individual contributors recognize what great coaching looks like? do we help people look at, well, who should leaders coach? Not just the problem performers, not just the A team. Like, do we equip leaders to recognize that their role is to coach up, down, and across the organization? And do we also give them some tools? Like, when is it most appropriate for leaders to coach? I coach when people are equipped. I coach when individuals can start to come up with their own solutions. And I look for opportunities to employ that more than I do currently. I think for many of us, if we go back to that coaching impact model, we spend so much time on the directing, advising end of the continuum and not as much time on the coaching end. And that's where the impact takes place. If you look at this slide and you say, oh gosh, our organization would get a wide variety of responses to these questions, you're not alone. The organizations we work with every day, this is what they struggle with. And I do think one conversation at a time, one person at a time, we start to move the needle. My hope is as you leave here, you leave with some thoughts around how will I move the needle, regardless of what your role is. Again, my hope is that you'll join us for this. I think it's one way we can move the needle by bringing something like this or bringing opportunities for people to practice coaching into the organization. And again, there's some instructions there around how to join it. My hope is as well, you'll join us for the next webinar. This is around developing coaching skills, why middle managers matter most. I do, again, want to say that we would love to help. You see myself and my colleague, Julie Henner, are on the screen here. We are passionate about the work we do. And if we can be helpful in any way, my hope is that you'll reach out to one of us. And here's one thing that we typically hear from the clients we work with is we do take a personal approach to the work we do because we're so passionate about it. So reach out to us. If you have a question, if there's anything we can do to help equip you or help equip those around you, again, please, please, please reach out to us. And lastly, again, a couple of things that we do offer in terms of ways that you can bring some of Bluepoint content into your organization. We have a workshop called Leaders Coach, wonderful workshop, which really looks at the 3 questions we talked about today. We also have a cohort-based group where we help organizations build coaches inside organizations, so leader coaches inside organizations. It's a more cohort-based workshop. And then our sister organization has a certification around coaching for engagement and performance, which helps HR professionals equip themselves to start to build a coaching culture inside organizations. We have a wonderful staff of executive coaches if one-on-one coaching is something that you might be interested in. But again, my hope is that you'll reach out to us if we can be helpful in any way. I know there are some resources in that widget, including the deck, as well, those 60 big coaching questions. I hope you found it helpful. So glad that you were so open to connecting in the chat pod. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks, everyone.